This Wednesday, the 6th of May, and I want to talk about this time last week. We're delving into something that's suddenly everywhere again, the perception of the royal family. Now, King Charles made headlines last week during his high-profile visit to the US. He delivered quite the speech to Congress that was so warmly received. In fact, he got a standing ovation before he even opened his mouth. The clip went viral. Social media, of course, lit up, and it's raised a big question. Are the royals having a resurgence in public interest? But also, for you tuned into Radio London, what kind of impact will this have for us as Londoners? Joined on the line now with royal expert and commentator Ben Lord. Ben, great to have you on BBC Radio London. Firstly, can we just unpack that standing ovation for King Charles? What does it tell us about how he's being received internationally right now?
Well, I think what we saw last week is a recognition of the kind of brand value that the royal family has on the world stage. We haven't just been any monarchy, and there are a good deal of different monarchies across Europe and the wider world, in as much as when the Queen was alive, she wasn't just a queen, she was the Queen. And King Charles is much the same. He is the king. And we are held in phenomenal regard by none more so than the Americans, who just gush at the fact that we've got this near 1,000-year-long institution that is, 4 times longer than what they as a country in terms of their independence is. And they just love what we stand for, the traditions, the cultural values, and it really, as King Charles identified during that speech he made to Congress last week, it shows actually that when we think that we're driving wedges between one another and dwindling apart, we're actually closer together than we always have because of those common cultural values that we possess. And it wasn't just one standing ovation, it was about 12, I think I counted, over the 28 minutes that he was speaking. There were so many different topics that his speech touched on that resonated so strongly with the members of Congress that they were on their feet every 3 or 4 minutes.
It's quite something. You can talk about the jokes, the gifts, the state dinner. Washington definitely rolled out the red carpet for the King and Queen. But it kind of leads me nicely to discuss an element that many people still are replaying again and again, because as much as Donald Trump did praise King Charles III for getting the Democrats to stand during his Congress address, during the banquet, that was on the second day of the state visit to the US, the King made quite a few quips about the Middle East crisis, a naked Sir Winston Churchill in the White House, and Trump's readjustments to the White House. What did you make of all that?
I mean, again, I think it demonstrates that, King Charles, much like his father, was quite good at making light-hearted references when actually there was a deeper meaning beyond perhaps how it superficially appeared. And Donald Trump, being as eccentric as he is, would have probably only taken the superficial nature of what was being said and therefore believed that was aligning with what he thinks is right, particularly on issues such as Iran and the Middle East conflict at the moment. So I don't think we saw King Charles behaving in a way that's anything different to what he always watched his mother do, and indeed how he has approached his time as our monarch. But I think it does nevertheless demonstrate that there were some real quite genius strokes of luck that went into that visit last week. I mean, none less than giving the bell named Trump.
Absolutely.
That just absolutely soaked up so much adulation and appreciation that, if there was ever a moment in that 4-day visit where, the job in hand was to rebuild relations, they did it in that one move alone.
Well, I mean, of course, you talk about that, and then the viral moment that still is being shared, thousands of times, when King Charles joked that if it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking French, in reference to the battle between Britain and France to control North America in the 18th century.
Absolutely. It just goes to show that, whilst Trump has, not just to the UK, but also even to Japan, made various kind of insensitive remarks about the Second World War and some of the history where, they feel they parachuted in and bailed out the situation. And if it hadn't done, then, we'd be a country speaking German left, right and centre, perhaps. But, it does show that actually the history goes back even further. And the facts ultimately don't lie. And the further back in history you go, the more they stand up and stack up.
So within that, can we discuss perception of the royal family now? Oftentimes when we look at US media, there's just been the whole debating coverage around Prince Harry and Prince William and what that means for the king. But do you think that shift has now occurred where really the US and other, countries globally are taking the royal family, the monarchy more seriously in terms of King Charles and what he has to say?
I don't think the global perception of the British monarchy has particularly changed at all. It has had a lot of things to deal with in the last 5 or 6 years. We've had obviously the issue with Harry and Meghan stepping down as royals or as active working members of the royal family and leading a private life overseas. There's obviously been the issues with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and the Epstein scandal. And then in the midst of all that was the transition from the longest reigning monarch in British history of 70 years into then a new, even more modernised, slimmed down monarchy that King Charles is implementing. So I don't think the perception has changed a great deal. And what we also have to just remember, particularly when we're comparing the relationships with King Charles as a father and that of his 2 sons, these people are exactly that, human beings and people who are family members, where they will have their private family issues and moments, which frankly none of us should have any judgment on, because they're no different to any of the rest of us who have families and issues like that to contend with on a daily basis. So I think you do have to separate the two as much as you can. Nevertheless, these are people who are very, very public facing, have a duty to the people of this country and the Commonwealth. And that can be a real challenge to do. But I think that the, perception has changed because the dynamics of the royal family has changed, not just for King Charles, but even in his mother's reign and even before that as well. So I think it is one of those things that constantly evolves and changes in accordance with the modernisation of the times that we're in.
It's an important point that you make, but of course some of our listeners will be thinking, when you have members of the royal family, specifically Prince Harry and Meghan, who do these huge documentaries sharing so much, well then of course the public will have questions about it. But let's move to London, and if we can, has public sentiment shifted at all since Charles became king, or are we still kind of seeing a divide in how people feel about the monarchy?
Well, incidentally, it's 3 years ago today that King Charles and Queen Camilla's coronation took place in London. And I can remember watching it live on television throughout the day that the BBC were broadcasting the events, and the Mall was rammed packed, absolutely rammed packed. And there will be those both in London and the wider country that says that the Republican movement is increasing in this country. People want to see the monarchy abolished. But actually, I think if you look at that scene alone, there must have been 1 million people standing in the Mall. The last time I saw that many people congregating down the line of the Mall was almost 25 years ago during Her Majesty the Queen's Golden Jubilee, when there was the famous fly past of Concorde with the red arrows. And I think that just goes to show that, being closest to the royal palaces, Londoners and indeed the wider British public still have this enormous affection and support for the monarchy. And, they're coming out, whether it's trooping the colour every year, whether it's key milestone anniversaries, or even something as symbolic as a coronation, the first that we'd seen as a country for over 70 years. I think it demonstrates that we've still, we might be modernising, the royals are changing, as I mentioned earlier, with that ongoing dynamism in what they do, but we do pomp, ceremony, circumstance and tradition better than anywhere in the world.
We certainly do pomp better, don't we?
We do. And you only have to look into the wider Commonwealth, places like Australia, where there's always been that almost tenuous, are they going to go Republic, aren't they? But, we've seen, particularly during King Charles's reign, and with more being done by the Prince and Princess of Wales, that, Australia's support for the monarchy is improving and becoming less tenuous.
So how much do moments like this big diplomatic win actually move the needle on the royal family's long-term relevance, would you say?
Well, it certainly demonstrates that as a country, the government, and of course it is His Majesty's government, but nevertheless, the sitting government have got really quite, dare I use the pun, jewel in the crown by being able to roll out the big guns that is the King and Queen, who, and as we saw last week by King Charles, supremely diplomatic what he did last week. You know, we haven't seen really and truthfully anybody leading a government in this country doing something like that for a very, very long time. And, you know, what it did sent reverberations not just through America, but indeed through this country, that actually, from a moral high ground stakes, we are up there and we're doing it very, very well.
Pleasure having you on Radio London, Ben. Thank you for joining us today. Royal expert and commentator Ben Lord. If you'd like to share your thoughts and perceptions of the monarchy, get in touch 0800 731 2000.